So I'm going to start off just by saying, Becky, this is a safe space and I'm not here to judge you for your responses to my questions. I am here to interview individuals so their voices are heard and awareness is spread. If at any point you feel uncomfortable, you can stop or pause the interview. If you don't wish to disclose or discuss a certain question, you are welcome to simply say pass and I'll move on to the next question. Before we start, I'm going to advise you that there's a trigger warning, as the last question I'm going to be interviewing you about is around your personal negative experiences within the LGBTQIA+ community. So there's a total of 13 questions. Does this all sound okay with you?
I think so.
Okay, awesome. Right, so question number 1, what is your name?
Becky Davies.
Question number 2, what is the date and time?
The date, 10th of December 2020, and the time, gosh, I don't know. It's 3:51 in the afternoon.
Okay, thank you. And who is present in this interview?
Just me, Becky Davies.
What?
You?
Yeah. Question 4, what is your relation to me?
I am your lecturer.
And number 5, if you don't mind me asking, what is your age?
I am 35.
Question number 6, what is your present sexual identity?
Lesbian.
And number 7, what is your present gender identity?
Female.
Question 8, has your gender identity or sexual orientation affected your experience or experiences with employment opportunities?
That's a really interesting question, and one where I'm having to go through quite a deep archive because I've had so many different employment experiences.
Okay, no rush.
Sometimes it's been of benefit in the sense that I am part of a community that seeks creative experiences, that seeks well-being, or just really needs that right now, particularly in the state that the world is currently in and the changes that we're all going through in terms of societal attitudes. And so having somebody that speaks authentically from that experience is really useful in terms of coming out, in terms of employment and representation, in terms of the fact that I'm civilly partnered and why I haven't chosen to be married, for example, or to be upgraded, as it were, to marital status.
Yeah.
So being open to having all of these conversations and talking about it from personal experience means that as a workshop facilitator and as a creative, it opens a number of doors for me. It also, in an unspoken sense, closes some doors for me. But this was more the case earlier on in my career. And strangely, this was more the case within theatre and performance, because I wasn't somebody that would bend to male superiors, or I wasn't somebody who would be taken in by male advances, which did happen a lot in the early part of my career. And as soon as I said the word lesbian, you know, it sort of put me off limits. And so some of those conversations or ways into the industry that some people might take, even if it's just simple flirtatious, or even just the possibility of there being some form of attraction, some sort of dalliance, all of that, you know, wasn't on the cards as soon as I said the word lesbian. And I love saying the word lesbian because it's really quite blunt.
Yeah.
Rather than gay or rather than queer, which, you know, I think I like to really put forward my pride in being female and for being a lesbian. That is what I am. I'm not gay. I'm a lesbian, and feeling part of that community. Not to exclude myself from other communities and not to exclude people from mine, but just to be proud of that identity. And even once my mum said to me, oh, don't say lesbian, just say gay, or, you know, something a little bit more palatable, because for some reason, lesbian, les just doesn't sound nice to certain people. So, you know, I use it as a sword, I suppose, or use it as a shield, or as a talisman, something positive, not a weapon, but something positive, to take forward, to protect myself in those male dominated spaces, but also to be proud of who I am. But it did create problems for me. It did shut certain doors. And so I've ended up, for the majority of my career, either working with people who are very pro the LGBTQI plus community, or who are female. And I think that's no accident. I think that is a consequence of my identity in theatre and performance. And that might not be the case for everyone, but that's just my own experience.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing that. You ready to move on to the next question?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. So, have you ever questioned your sexual or gender identity?
Oh, yeah, completely. When I was in sixth form college, I was in such denial, and I joined the LGBT society, which was called Platform 6 at my college, Atlantic College, as a straight representative, which was hilarious. I didn't really understand why I wasn't really interested in relationships at that age. And I thought that there was something wrong with me. But I knew I was really open to whatever possibility could come before me, but I didn't really know. And so I just assumed myself as straight. And I think that's really problematic for all young people, is that you're assumed straight until proven otherwise. You know, sort of like the status quo is straight, and then you have to then come out, rather than it being an open possibility and then defined later, or, you know, you kind of get defined as soon as you're out of the womb. Yeah. And so I just assumed I was straight as somebody that had grown up in a very straight environment. Not that my parents were quite, I don't know, they're quite left wing, they're very positive and accepting, but it still wasn't part of the narrative that I was familiar with, and definitely not in school. Yeah. Although in school they voted me most likely to become a lesbian, which was not exactly the reward I wanted when I was younger, and it was really not cool to be a lesbian, and I didn't know if I was one. So then I went to sixth form college, and like I said, I was a straight representative of an LGBT society. And then I went to university, and I said to my co-years, I want to join the LGBT society. And they were going, why? Why do you think that space is for you as a straight person? And I couldn't answer them. I just kind of went, oh, because I think everyone should be interested in everything. And yeah, so they found me very odd, and that immediately created a social divide between myself and others. Yeah. And so it wasn't until I joined the LGBT society to go bowling at Cardiff University, that wasn't even my university. And then just gradually I started thinking that I was bi, and I tried to go out with lots of men, but it just didn't fit. And it wasn't until I was in my early 20s, when I found my first love, that I realized that I was a lesbian. And I think it took me finding love to realize fully. And so for me, it was later than it is for most people. So I very much went on that bi now gay later journey, very stereotypical journey. But I think it was due to societal pressures, and had the world been as it is now, I probably would have come out when I was a lot younger. But I went on a very funny little journey to get there.
Yeah. Okay. And question 10. What is your opinion on labels within the LGBTQIA+ community?
What sort of labels, as in sexual orientation labels?
Yeah, so the question after this, question 11, is if you are queer, do labels provide you with a source of comfort or pressure? So I want to know, do you think that they have, do you think you have an advantage of labeling yourself, or or like this is your personal experience,
Okay.
or do you think that it is disadvantage you, or maybe you feel both? I don't know. What's your opinion?
I sort of partially answered this earlier when I'm thinking about the label that I adopt myself. I'm very much a lesbian. The first letter in LGBTQI plus. That's for a reason. I think I feel very safe in my lesbian brethren, which doesn't make sense. Saying brethren and lesbian in the same sentence doesn't make sense. But the point is, in my lesbian collective community, I feel very safe, and I feel almost like I have an instant point of connection with other people who are of the same sexual orientation. And this is not in a romantic sense, very much in terms of life experience and similar stories and similar processes. However, I am noticing a difference now with a younger generation who are now coming out, and where it's really not a struggle or a big deal, and there haven't been all of those very awkward moments or perhaps troublesome moments or violent moments. That now is being more so experienced, by people who identify as non-binary, queer, trans, those who are really exploring the boundary, I suppose, between the binary, in between the binary. And so the idea of sort of war wounds and sharing war wounds, as it were, that's quite difficult when it comes to an intergenerational conversation. I used to love speaking to older lesbians and to hear about all of the cool rallies and stuff that they went through, and what they've got now to show for it is our marriage equality. It's our presence in the media, etc., etc. So they've really won that hard. It's been hard won. And I love speaking to them and hearing their stories, but equally it sounds terrifying. It sounds frightening, and I've never had to go through that experience of being frightened. I've always been able to hold somebody's hand in the street. So lesbian as a word for me isn't frightening, it isn't scary, it isn't something that I'm hesitant to say, because those people fought for a world where I could hold somebody else's hand who was the same gender as me, and really embrace that and embrace my identity. So I'm really lucky in that sense. And I do know that I'm lucky. However, using the word lesbian now feels really strange in a contemporary context when we are, sometimes I do use the word queer because it's a more inclusive term and it involves the whole community. And it is a term which has been reclaimed from its historically negative meaning. So that is something that I'm quite interested in using as a word, and as an empowered word, as an inclusive word. So I'm a queer person within a subsection of lesbianism, if that makes sense. So that's how I sort of navigate that experience. However, I feel when I say that I'm queer, that I feel more at one with a younger generation. Not that I'm particularly old, but I'm talking about teenagers and people in their early 20s who are really starting to explore who they are, where queer is just enough. It's saying I'm not straight, I'm other to that.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. Right, I've got two more questions. So Question number 12. Can you tell me about a positive experience or experiences as either being part of the LGBTQIA+ community or being an ally?
There's been lots. Earlier I was asked about how it has positively impacted my my profession, and something that happened a few years ago was the Queer Arts Collective, and naturally, because I identify as queer and as a lesbian, I was able to straight away be part of that community and know that I was an artist and that I belonged in that community. And we came together and really thought of this alternative scene of queer narratives, queer voices, and this sense of, you know, sort of raising up those voices and our identity and really celebrating that and trying to reclaim space, because it's gone through a process of erasure as well. You know, there, for example, where I was brought up in and around Cardiff and the valleys, there just have been more and more reduced spaces that are LGBTQI plus specific. So I'm talking about gay pubs, clubs, theatres, etc. All of those have been reduced. Opportunity to start opening that up again and suddenly see all of these people from your community in one room alongside allies, and suddenly seeing the volume again was something really positive. Seeing all of those bodies in one space that are of a similar belief system to you in this inclusive approach to life, but also in a way of enabling these narratives to come forward. So it was a really beautiful moment where you could suddenly see your community again.
Yeah.
Because it's been a long time since I've been in a pub or a club where I feel like I can see myself reflected in that, because perhaps we've evolved to a point now where we aren't other. So, and that's an interesting place to be, to not want to be other, but also when you're other, you're something special at the same time, and you have a cause and you have something different about you, and something that you're proud of for being different, and it is part of your identity that you want to shout about. But it's difficult to do that when you're no longer other, when you're not considered other anymore. So that was a really lovely moment where I came together with quite like-minded people. That was really positive. But I've had many positive moments in my life. For example, when I went to Elfest, which was a giant lesbian festival in a field in the middle of nowhere, and that sense of different narratives coming through, and then subsections within the lesbian community, and really exploring what it means to be female, what it means to be a woman, or a non-binary, partially female, you know. So it really kind of exploring that sense of female identity, and the different perspectives that people were coming from, and really celebrating that. And again, there was this moment where, even in this sort of day and age, as it were, you could see yourself all amassing in the middle of a field, and so you no longer felt like you're, well, it just felt special. It felt like a special moment to be in a field with lots of other people that have been through similar experiences or view life in a similar way. Although that doesn't say anything about people's politics or, you know, other people's other belief systems. And that's the other thing. Like, it's not to mistake me saying like-minded people for saying that they are entirely like-minded. I just mean in terms of that experience of sexual orientation and perhaps gender identity, perhaps.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. And then the last question, question 13. So a trigger warning is advised. Can you tell me about a negative experience as being part of the LGBTQIA+ community?
It's a really difficult question, because I suppose the only negative experience I've had has been the process of having to come out repeatedly, and that I have to even discuss my sexual orientation in so many different spaces. That's really frustrating.
Yeah.
it wasn't until I had this is difficult because it wasn't until I thought I had a wife, and I now have a spouse because my partner is non-binary. But it wasn't until I was civilly partnered to somebody that I felt I had this sort of, I don't know, this clout behind me, this legitimate thing that I could show to people and kind of go, this is real, this is a real thing.
Yeah.
And also that it's respectable. So for example, if I go into a bank or a shop or whatever, and I say my wife or my spouse, there's this level of credibility that comes with it where people don't question. Whereas if I said my girlfriend, people's heads turn. Or, you know, if I say my partner and then my partner, and they can see my non-binary partner coming towards me and they're going, oh, well, that person is female bodied currently, so therefore that person's a lesbian. And there's just, you can see all of the cogs turning in their minds, like looking at the two of us together. And so you're constantly having to come out in that sense, that is to be highlighted, that is different. And I suppose me on my own as quite a female presenting female person, the only time when I have to come out is when I'm with my partner, when I'm with my spouse, or when I'm buying something for my spouse, or I'm doing something on behalf of my spouse. But that's, how many times a day is that? That's all the time. And there was even a point where, because we teach and we work on the same course in the university, and there was even a point where somebody said to me, are you sure you want to come out to your students? And I thought, where in any other educational institution is there a problem about two members in a faculty being married?
Yeah. And
I said, why would that be a problem if the students knew that we were married, you know, that knew that we were civilly partnered? And they said, oh, well, you know, and I said, what? I don't know. I don't know what you mean, you know, almost as if it's naughtier or not as respectable to be married to somebody that was then of the same gender as me. But now it's different because the landscape has changed and that's not being questioned as much. I mean, I was having that question coming towards me maybe 5 years ago. You know, 5, 6, 7 years ago when we had our civil partnership ceremony, and you know, the questions were being asked around whether I could tell the students that I was taking time off to get civilly partnered. You know, so those are the only difficult times really that I found with my identity being what it is. And I know how incredibly privileged I am and how I haven't had a series of violent experiences, for example, or things that other people have experienced. And it's very much about being confident about who you are and posing questions. When people ask really stupid questions, just give them the question back and kind of say, why would it be a problem? And if they can't answer you, then there isn't a problem, and that can be an illuminating moment for them. But no, I'm really lucky. I've not had too many negative experiences as a lesbian person.
Yeah. So that's the end of them. So is there anything else you'd like to add or say, or are you happy to leave it there?
I think so, if you're happy.
Yeah, okay, I'll stop the recording there.